So the lecture today is on the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children. This is also known as WIC, and all nutrition majors should have a really good understanding of what WIC is because it's one of the best programs in the nation that takes care of individuals, women and children, infants and children during vulnerable times of their life, which is during development, right? When pregnancy happens and when breastfeeding happens and when the first few years of life for kids. And so because we don't have a very good safety net based on state legislation, this is a nationally funded program that the states manage. But this fills in the cracks for many people that don't have access to healthcare and desperately need it in order to have a pregnancy outcome. So here's the statement that, with the purpose of WIC: to safeguard the health of low-income women, infants, and children up to age 5. So up to age 5 and then they're done, who are at nutritional risk by providing nutritional foods to supplement their diet, information on healthy eating, and referrals to healthcare. So I have to preface this statement or this presentation by my personal passion and interest with WIC. I have been conducting research on WIC and how WIC affects the diets of infants and toddlers and in high-risk populations. I've also had nice grant funding from Texas WIC through the USDA in order to work on improving enrollment in WIC and making sure that WIC is accessible for all people in the state that need it, and also meeting the needs of people that are interested in this program. So along with Dr. Biediger Friedman, we have managed a couple of grants. One has been to develop an app to provide nutrition education and information about eligibility for WIC. And then we investigated that process, and from that work, we learned that women want to have videos to help with the education process. They want it to be easy to enroll, and they want to learn by videos. So fast forward now, the grant for the next year is given to Texas state researchers to develop video and other information for education with women across the state. So I'm pretty happy with this work and proud of this work, and I feel like it's important and cool. The other thing that we're doing now is we're doing this right now is we have a grant to develop a chatbot for WIC. It's a Texas WIC chatbot. And what this chatbot does is, you've done chatbots, right? You've gone to a site to maybe to buy, am I going to buy this, or I want this, am I interested in this product? And then there'll be a little bubble that shows up, or a chat bot or something that says, you want to ask me questions? And so in many cases, when you can type in a question, and in many cases that's a piece of technology, it's not actually the person on the other side, it's programmed to answer questions. So that's what we've been developing for the past 3 years, is a chat bot for the state of Texas for people interested in enrolling in WIC. And so what it does, we've developed all the dialogue for it, and we've been testing it, and we've tested it with potential clients and with existing clients. We work with all the people across the state in order to find out how to develop the chatbot to the best of our ability so that it's smooth, it meets the needs of potential clients, and helps them enroll. The reason that this is so important, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but WIC has changed the world. It started in the early 1970s. Until that time, there weren't resources for women and children during these developmental stages, but we were able, the US was able to develop this program, and we keep funding it and keep supporting it. And what happens is it's changed outcomes, birth outcomes, and potential outcomes for kids that are born into poverty, all right, or born to women at nutritional risk. So it's a great program. Many of our students who don't become dietitians end up working in WIC clinics, and some who do become dietitians also do that. We have one of our graduates from our graduate program who's now working at the state WIC office, and we've had others that have run through there as well. So it's a great career opportunity, and I love it because it changes the world. And that's because we don't have the infrastructure to help everybody otherwise. Now, a critical thing is enrollment's gone down over the past few years. And that's scary. It makes a difference. We know it helps outcomes, it helps women, it helps children. But enrollment's gone down. There's a variety of reasons for that we've been looking into. Some of it has to do with how hard is it to sign up for WIC? What are the barriers? Do I have to go somewhere? Can I do it online? And so we're addressing all of those things in our work. So I'm a lover of WIC, as I tell Texas WIC whenever we have our weekly meetings. I'm amazed at the work that they do. And this is a program that's funded federally, managed by the states, and also by tribal organizations. The only thing I will say is no, I'm gonna stop there. Okay, so you know what WIC is? Okay, so history, federally funded, piloted in 1972, became permanent in 1974. The purpose, improve health of individuals at nutritional risk during times of critical development, right? You know what that is. What does WIC do? It provides vouchers for healthy food. So people can go and get all the items which we're going to talk about. They're healthful items. Health screening, such as iron, they look for iron deficiency, you do fingerprint tests. Remember how important iron deficiency is? This is a way to catch it and help mitigate the problems if people have early health care. Breastfeeding support, there's a peer education program in many places across the country where people that have participated with it have successfully breastfed and help their peers, which is one of the most important ways to change people's lives, right? And to help people get through the issues with breastfeeding is to have somebody like you that says, look, I have felt that too, and here's what I learned. So we all need the brainiacs and the healthcare providers, but we oftentimes need our people. If you think about that, we used to, in society before all this internet stuff happened, maybe before you guys were born, we had more social networks that were in person, right? And people like to learn from each other. And now we're all isolated and we get our information, for better, for worse, and mostly for worse, from the internet. And if you're lucky and you're becoming educated in science, then you also learn how to look up evidence-based information. But it's confusing for people. How do I breastfeed? How important is it? How do I get it done? And that peer educators can change the world. So that's a part of WIC too. We also provide nutrition education, which is what the next phase of our grant work is to do, is to provide education for WIC participants in the state. And that's been a dream of mine for 10 years. And they also get immunization and screening. So enrollment in 2019, this hasn't changed that much. 6.4 million in the US, and in Texas, more than 500,000, maybe 3/4 million. This is a decline. A few years ago, it was 1 million. So that's our concern. We know there are people out there that aren't getting the benefits. Look at the bottom statement that more than 50% of infants in the US participate in WIC. Think about that. Every year, before the pandemic, about 4 million babies are born in the United States every year. Now it's gone down a little bit. About 4 million, so 2 million participate in WIC. WIC services can change the world. They can change the health outlook of kids, so it's really important. It's also a negative statement in that we don't have an infrastructure to provide healthcare for people. And this is a critical fill in the gap situation. Okay, how important is it? WIC provides assistance to a lot of people, health during critical times, foods that they may not be able to have otherwise, less breastfeeding, potential to build healthy food preferences because the foods for infants and toddlers are healthful. And once they eat those more healthful foods, they're more likely to want them and accept them later, and improves the health of the entire nation. So who's eligible? Now I have these red categories, and I want to explain them, but this is really, I want you to have a general view. So categorically, it's for women that are pregnant, after a postpartum up to 6 months, and if they're breastfeeding up to a year. So if women are breastfeeding, they can get benefits, including the foods offered for a full year. Okay, so this helps her nutrition and the nutrition of the child. Infants up to the first birthday and children up to the 5th. Once they're 5, we're done. Okay, so WIC is no longer service. So these are the categories. And residential, they have to live, you know, you can't apply to join WIC in New Jersey. If you're here, you need to go to your local WIC clinic. So wherever you are in the United States, that's where you go. There's an income cutoff, no more than 185% of poverty. I have the next slide, I'll show you what that means, but that sounds like a lot of money. It's not very much money. Our poverty levels are insane in the United States. And if they've already qualified for all these other programs, then they can automatically get enrolled in WIC as well. But I just want to bring this up. Right now, and WIC is inclusive. It doesn't require proof of citizenship. And that's good because there are 11 million people living in the United States that don't have, that are not citizens. Many of them are here legally. Some are here illegally. I'm not going to go into that, but many people are here legally. And that means they pay taxes, they work and they pay taxes. And I know this is a trigger for a lot of people. It's not for me. I think we should take care of people. But right now, one of the reasons that enrollment is probably declined is even if people are citizens of the US or are legal residents, they don't want to sign up because they're afraid that they may be in trouble because we've had a difficult few years. So the pressure is just a pressure. So income, it's about money. And then nutritional risk. So this is a general concept. There can be medical or a dietary-based condition, you know, underweight, anemia, past history, or they may not have a good diet, and so on. So it's kind of easy if you meet the income criteria and these other. It's fairly easy to qualify for WIC. So what do I mean by income guidelines? These are 2019. Again, I update these every couple of years. This is fine. It's about the same. So what is a cutoff for 185% poverty? So for a family of four, here's your gross monthly income, and here's your gross household income. Gross. Okay. So this is before money's taken out, right? For Medicare, Social Security, all the things that we take things out of. So this number doesn't work in many cities. This is not enough money to support a family of four. If you think about what families need to do, they may both, if there's two parents and they may both be working. If they have children, they've got to deal with childcare, they've got to deal with transportation, they've got to deal with icing. This may seem like a lot of money when you're in college still and you're living on whatever Band-Aid you guys live on, because I remember doing that too, like no new clothes, no new this, no new that, no car. But these are full-blown families that can't make ends meet because this is not enough money. So this is the cutoff for a family of four. If they make less than or equal to this, then they qualify for WIC. But see, they can make 50,000 and then they don't qualify. So let's look at Austin, because I live here. Right now, the minimum wage, 7.25. So for two adults, if they're both working minimum wage full-time, they get 28,000 a year. Here's a cost of living in Austin is 52. Do y'all see the difference in these two numbers? Okay, this is what's wrong with minimum wage. And it's an argument that's going on across the nation right now. Everybody has an opinion about it, but our federally mandated minimum wage does not support families in many, many, many communities who work full time. These aren't people that people may think, oh, well, you're just not trying. These are people that are working full time. They're burning the candle at both ends. They're doing everything they can, and their wages are so low that they can't pull it through. And so that's an argument for a better minimum wage. But in the meantime, WIC is absolutely critical because without this, food's not available. Okay, so there's not enough. Just for fun, here's some typical annual salaries. Some of them are nice, depends on what kind of job you have. So there's some that provide more than that cutoff. And then there's some that provide quite a bit less. Sales related, administration, or admins at the university don't make enough money, and so on. So it depends on the types of jobs. These are jobs that are full-time jobs, annual salaries. Okay, so now we set the stage for there's a need for WIC. You know how important nutrition is during pregnancy and during the early years, right? So you know that too. And we need to fill in the gap. That's what WIC does now. So this is a, you can go to texaswic.org and learn lots of things about WIC. So one of the benefits though is food packages, and the word food package is how they label it. But I mentioned earlier subsidies for foods. So there's, or not subsidies, but that, yeah, there's actual tickets they get or actual credit they get where they can go in and just pick up the items, right? They on a monthly basis they're covered. So let's look and see what these food packages are. What do people get? Okay, if they're formula fed or formula fed, partially breastfed or fully breastfed, 0 to 5 months. Remember, that's when you use just the liquid diet before complementary foods. Formula fed get enough formula. If they're partially breastfed, they get some, and if they're fully breastfed, they don't get any right now. They're breastfed. Okay, so this is a big dollar value. People that are formula feeding their kids, this is worth a couple thousand a year, maybe, depending on what's going on. So the amount of food, formula food provided depends on the age and the amount of feeding. So this is formula, but now we look at the older kids. So this is 0 to 5 months before they're getting any food. This is when they still consume breast milk or formula, but they also get additional items from WIC. So if they're fully formula fed kids, they get enough formula, infant cereal for that iron and zinc, and baby food, fruits and veggies. They get little jars, right? Which is very helpful when you're feeding kids if you have these jars. Okay. Partially breastfed kids get infant cereal and the same thing. Okay, they get some formula and they get the same type of stuff. Now, here's an incentive for mothers to breastfeed. Notice they didn't get formula up here. So if the infant's fully breastfed, the mom doesn't get formula or anything. But if she is fully breastfeeding the kid, the fully breastfed kid gets more food. So it gets the same infant cereal, but it gets double the amount of fruits and vegetables and baby food meat. And it also gets baby food meat. So a fully breastfed kid gets the benefits of 12 months of breastfeeding, plus the infant cereal for iron and zinc, and then also double the amount of fruits and vegetables. Plus they also get baby food meats. And remember, we talked about how iron status is an issue for infants. So especially if they're breastfed and their stores run out, so the baby food meats can be helpful. The take-home message: foods are not offered until 6 months. Breastfed infants get baby food meats and double the baby food, fruits, and vegetables. This incentivizes breastfeeding. This is a take-home message that I want you to have from this class. So Kristen's making a note to make sure that we have this on the final, probably on exam 3 and also on the final. How is breastfeeding incentivized? Okay. Now for women and children, it depends on, the age and so forth. They get things like juice, milk, cereal, eggs, fruit, vegetables with a dollar value. This dollar value has recently gone up. Cheese, whole grains, canned fish, so tuna for the breastfeeding moms for omega-3 fats, beans under peanut butter, yogurt, and more milk. So look at this. These are not your highly processed foods. These are real foods. And in to the extent that we can, obviously milk's partially processed, but in reality, compared to dough products, right? This is a pretty good amount. So the idea is these things make a difference. The take-home message: breastfeeding is encouraged by providing more juices for the vitamin C, more money for fruits and vegetables, and also these items. So they get a little more. So they incentivize items for breastfeeding. So breastfeeding moms get more food. So let's go back to the breastfeeding. Breastfeeding babies after 6 months get more fruits and vegetables and more baby food, and they get baby food meat. If mom's breastfeeding, she gets more food too. So what WIC is doing is saying, if you're going to breastfeed, here's some more stuff. If you're going to formula feed, here's your formula. breastfeed, let's round out the diet. So that's their way of incentivizing breastfeeding. The reason I talk about this is that the history has been interesting. Before 2009, because it's when we updated our packages. For that time, a lot of people participated in WIC strictly because they wanted the free formula. And then whenever you said you focus groups, you ask people, so what do you like about WIC? They go, well, it's a formula. I want the formula. Is this worth a couple $1,000s? So WIC had to change because breastfeeding is so much healthier and they need to be able to incentivize it. Now, formula is fine, but I'm just saying you understand there are potential benefits of breastfeeding. In order to do that and to comply with the Surgeon General's position on breastfeeding, WIC changed to try to incentivize breastfeeding. So people didn't just come to WIC for free formula, they also came because they would be able to get healthful foods. Okay. So this is my way of showing images of the difference in the packages. So breastfed infants, 4 to 6 months, the babies don't get anything else. They're breastfeeding, WIC doesn't give them anything. If the kids are formula fed, then they get their formula. Okay, so this is 6 to 12 months, so these are older kids. So the breastfed and the formula fed kids both get infant cereal that's fortified with iron and zinc. Formula fed kids get their formula. And but breastfed infants get all these baby food meats and double the amounts of fruits and vegetables. So this is the incentive to continue breastfeeding if you're looking for benefits from WIC. How does WIC help people? Women who participate give birth to healthier babies that are more likely to survive infancy. We've talked about infant mortality and maternal mortality, and so WIC is a safeguard. The participants eat more healthful foods. There's been multiple studies that have looked at, I've done some of them, that look to see if the foods are there that people will eat them. And it helps because this is a lower socioeconomic group, less likely to become vaccinated and immunized. WIC supports vaccine and immunization, so the kids in WIC are as likely to be immunized as rich kids. And children and mothers who participate in WIC while pregnant scored higher in mental and reading assessments later. And remember, early development is so important. We've talked about critical periods of development, so WIC is a very powerful organization. Now, I mentioned earlier that WIC enrollment has been declining. You can see what's going on. Look, for 2015 to 2000, I've got this backwards. It should be 2018 and 2019. This is way in the future. Okay, I just noticed it. 2018 and 2019, right? So you can see that we've gone from 8 million to not quite 6.5, and Texas has declined too. Okay, so that's why I'm doing my research with to help them with the chatbot to help facilitate enrollment, to make it easier for people to sign up and feel less threatened about the process. So I've done a lot of research, so you don't have to read all this kind of stuff I've done. So I have more since this time. Several thesis projects involved in WIC, some in San Marcos, some on the state level. I've had 2 other grants besides this. This is an internal grant. I have several grants from the state, and several publications looking at developing this information. It's been a fun area of research for us. And let's see. So
I have some questions, if you don't mind.
Please talk while I'm looking where my buttons are.
Okay. So I have a question about the I guess pay bracket that they go by for families, because it's something that I had to go through when I had my first child, because I was very young and I wasn't making a lot of money. Is the tax bracket, or does that have to do with funding? Because I feel like sometimes, even though social programs are great, it kind of locks people in to their pay and it prevents them from reaching, you know what I mean? Like, because they feel like if they make more, they're afraid to make more money because they're going to lose their benefits. But because of like the poverty line, sometimes that middle ground between poverty and being able to financially afford to pay for your food, like there's like this gap where if you enter that gap, you're not making enough money, but you're also not qualifying for programs. So is that?
Yeah, this is such a profound thing to say. I've actually spent time talking about this in the class before. I used to use thank you. I used to use what's called an income calculator And you can find these online for different cities. And say, okay, let's have a family of two. Let's give them this wage. Let's give them these costs. Here's what the average child care cost is. Here's what transportation is. Here's what utilities are. Here's what you're supposed to pay for health care, which is a big thing. And so we take a look at that, and you're absolutely right. If you can stay below that 185% of poverty, you get WIC and also other benefits. If you edge above that, you all of a sudden have less resources, fewer resources. You're absolutely right. It's one of the biggest problems with this. So it's like a disincentive to make more money, because there's a gap in there where you make more money and you just spend it, and you still don't have any more resources for your family. And and so let's say you work hard and you pick up another job. So what happens is you're away from your family more, you're away from them more, and you're still not making enough money to lift your family out of poverty, right? And so on. So it's such a good point. I wish I had a pat answer for it, but I just have compassion.
I had one more question too, because you mentioned that the enrollment is declining in WIC, and do you think, would that have anything to do with financial stability increasing? Like maybe families feel more financially stable and therefore not enrolling in WIC, or is it the other way around?
No, it's not right. Well, COVID has turned everything upside down, because so many people lost their jobs, and it's hard to see. At the same time, people have been afraid. People that are maybe marginal have been afraid to sign up for WIC if they have any family members that maybe here illegally or something like that. There's a fear. So, but at the same time, they need food. So we're not doing better off. In fact, the incident poverty is astronomical. And in the state of Texas, poverty is astronomical. It's almost impossible to get out of it because you're treading water, working full time, not making enough money, or minimum wage is not high enough to do anything. So it's not that people are better off. What's happened is people falling through the cracks. And the other thing about this, I mentioned this before, is we don't have well woman care in the state that meets the needs. So many women in vulnerable situations are just a mess, right? Their situation is very difficult. And I wish there was an answer to this. And the answer is policy, improving. And I think everybody would like to provide for their family. Everybody would like to be able to make enough money in order to support their family and not need, government assistance. But we don't have a setup like that now because we don't provide enough assistance. So no, things aren't getting better. I think people are fearful. And also there are barriers for signing up based on transportation and lack of childcare, which is what our chatbot's trying to get at. Our chatbot, most people in WIC, many of them don't have Wi-Fi at home, but almost all of them have smartphone with cellular, so they can access a chatbot. They can look for WIC on their phone, and we're making a chatbot that's friendly enough that hopefully they can enter information in such a way that they don't have to go in person. And because what would happen is people would show up with 3 kids at WIC, and you're trying to talk to somebody, you got 15 minutes, you're trying to sign up, and it's a mess, right? It's so hard. The barriers are getting, who's got transportation? In order to qualify for WIC, you can't really have that many resources, and yet it requires resources to show up. So we're trying to bridge that so people can do it from home. But it's an interesting and critical. Any other WIC thoughts? As always, I so much appreciate you guys caring about these things and thinking about it. I know the class isn't very rigorous now because the exams are open book, and I worry that your take-home message won't be what I want you to get. So please do what you can to soak it up, because what you're learning about some of this stuff can help. So you can help other people. So this is Paradigm Shift. We have talked about other age groups, and we've talked about development, we've talked about all these things, and now we're getting to teenagers. Okay, so or adolescents. So the lecture on adolescent nutrition is not very long, and you may relate to this more than some of the others. Some of you that have small children can have related earlier. But adolescent nutrition, many of you, this is your most recent passage, right, from into adulthood, from being an adolescent. So you probably have stronger memories of this. So I'm giving you some terms to frame what nutritionists and dietitians do when they work with people of different life stages and people that work with adolescents, right? One of the things that happens with adolescents is people go from being children to reproductive adults. That's the period of time, right? It's difficult. So when you're trying to figure out how many calories, say you're working with a family or child, how many calories does this person need? You know, if they're 14 or 12, it depends on where they are in their growth. If they're still kind of physically a kid, their calorie requirements are more like a kid. If they're getting into maturity, like if it's a female and she's starting to menstruate and stuff like that, that's different. Then she's losing more iron and her nutrient requirements change. So this is a period of transition. So, but everybody enters puberty at a different time. And so there are ways to categorize where they are. And this slide is about the sexual maturity rating. And I always ask this question about the Tanner stages, just so you know what it means. And the Tanner stage is a way of defining where somebody is. So obviously males over here, females over here. Where are they? You know, stage 5 on males is fully reproductive adult male. Okay, whatever age that happens. And females, same thing, fully reproductive, we're done. Okay, these are stages of development that happen. And we don't talk about this, well, how much hair is there? How much is this? That's not the nutrition conversation. And you're not going to be asking people these questions, but you might, if the parents, you're trying to figure out how the kid's growth is, you might go, well, they entered puberty yet. And they'll go, well, what does that mean? You might say, well, you know, are they growing hair? You know, something like that. So you might have a little bit of understanding of it. Or also, if you're looking at a medical chart, the Tanner stages might be on there as well. So you need to know, you don't need to know what these stages are at all. This is just showing you what, you don't have to be able to identify them, you just need to know what they are. Tanner stages are stages that define where people are in sexual maturity. And we care because the nutritional requirements increase. So girls reach puberty, and here's the landmarks. They have what's called a peak height velocity, which means they're growing the most. During that time when they're growing a lot, they may grow as much as 3.5 inches per year for about 2 years. And growth stops around, it's not a hard stop, but pretty much around age 16. And so typically you may be familiar with this in middle school and high school. Girls often get their height faster than boys. Right, girls in middle school often will, you know, I remember being 11 years old, I was 5'9", and it was just weird. Like everybody else was shorter. I didn't grow anymore after that, but that, you know, you get girls get their height faster sometimes. And so, but around age 16, it's going to stop. And this helps you if you're working in the family, go, you know, if she's 16 and you're working in weight management, don't anticipate that she's going to grow in height enough to matter anymore, right? So that's how we use this information. Okay, so menarche, this is defined by when the menstrual period starts. So it's menarche. Average age in the US is a little over 12 years. And by almost 14, 90% of girls have completed menarche. And here's what's interesting. This occurs 6 months after. So they grow after this peak height velocity. So they grow, and then about after 6 months, that's when the period starts. This is what's interesting. Once the menstrual cycle starts, there's not going to be much more growth. So if you're working with a family, talking with parents, and well, what's going on? Where is your daughter? If you know if she's already started her menstrual cycle, you can figure out how much growth to expect. Is she still going to put on a lot of inches? If she hasn't started her menstrual cycle, she could be right here. If she has started, then she's not going to grow much more. So it helps you figure out, what about her dietary intake? What are we expecting? Also, girls change, and we all need to know this, be aware of this, and accept this. And I swear this is so important. Girls' body fat normally changes from 19 to 25%. And this is not in the presence of overweight and obesity, which is really skewed these numbers. This is just for somebody that stays within the healthful range for body weight. They gain more body fat during this time. That's part of puberty. In order to reproduce successfully, women need body fat. And also during this time, about half of the bone mass accumulates. So y'all know we're going to talk about bone mass accumulation, but you can't build strong bones with a bad diet and physical inactivity. So it's real important that the diet's strong and activity is forward. Important. So what makes people start menarche? What makes somebody start at 12 and a half or 11 or whatever? It depends on, and I'm not going to ask you you make it on your final about the menstrual cycle, but it begins at that very beginning of the menstrual cycle. When is the gonadotropin releasing hormone system getting started? The thing that starts the ovulation, estrogen or progesterone, and does fertility happen, and does conception happen, and so forth. That whole menstrual cycle that we learned a while back starts at some point. It starts, and we're not exactly sure when. Why do some girls start periods at age 11, some 14? But we know there's some genes involved. And we also know that leptin matters. And if you remember, leptin is a hormone produced by our fat cells. So the more fat we have, the more leptin, and leptin has a role in puberty. So it's not alone, but basically what this is saying is gaining excess weight may start menarche early. Okay. So precocious puberty means early. I'm sorry for the graphic. This is the best I can do. Okay, when does it occur? When is precocious puberty? Some people start way too young. Girls can hit puberty at age 7, boys before age 9. These are mentally children, yet there are a variety of things that have increased or decreased the age at which this happens. So, it's not real common, but it's more common in girls and boys. It's more common among African American girls. Why? Why do some people enter puberty so early, which is entering for girls entering menarche or experiencing menarche? So if they were small and they gained really fast in the first couple of months when they were born, sometimes what people used to do is overfeed premature infants. So that could be a factor. Also, another contributor is if she has obesity or high calorie intake, high protein intake, and inactivity. These are risk factors for precocious puberty. And then there's some chemicals in our environment, you guys, and I sometimes I talk about this more than I have, and I mentioned them some I know, but there are chemicals like hard plastics. Bisphenol A is found in those. It's found in dental implants. Phthalates are found in all kinds of plastics, shower curtain liners, soft plastic toys. These are chemicals called endocrine disruptors that interfere with the endocrine or hormonal system. So they're interfering with development, and some pesticides too. So our environmental contamination based on the food containers we use and also the exposure to pesticides, plus our world of excess calorie intake together is increasing the risk for early puberty for girls. So why do we care? Well, it matters, right? 7 is too young. 9 is too young. Girls don't need to be sexually mature when they're girls. It's hard enough when they hit puberty between 14 and 16 and so forth. They develop then, but when they're children, it's very difficult. So the plus is they have higher bone mineral density, but negatively, they have a higher BMI associated with health risk for that. There's a marker for breast cancer. The earlier people start their periods, the greater the risk is. They're more at risk for early sexual intercourse well before they have the maturation to manage it, and also it's very stressful. Any comments on girls before I start talking about boys? Okay, so boys, we have the same term peak height velocity. It's about 14 years, and they can grow a lot, up to almost 5 inches per year. Instead of girls, when the growth ceased at around age 16, for boys, it's age 21. I've had college kids come in my class and go, I'm still growing, you know, because they're still growing. They're like 18, 19-year-old guys, and they're still growing. And usually it tops out around 21. And there's a lot of weight gain going on. And if this is a, you know, in the absence of being excessively sedentary, then this can be due to increase in muscle mass. And their body fat, in the absence of obesity, goes down. Okay, so it's normal maturation. Girls put on more fat, boys put on less fat. It's important that we accept this and we don't all try to be the same and be as lean as we think we should be. So what about nutrition? Okay, let's look at calories, females and males. Females need less. There are fiber calculations based on this, so they need less fiber, but they need more iron, and they need more iron because of menstruation. Now, these guys need iron because of growing muscle tissue, so the iron requirements are robust, but they're higher for females. Okay, and what's interesting, the zinc requirements aren't all that different, but many people don't get enough zinc. What about both of them? The protein calculation is right here. We just learned 46 grams per day. Fat, there was a range. Calcium, 1,300 milligrams, and notice actual calcium intake is 600, 800. So calcium intake can be really low in these age groups. And but folic acid is the same. Okay, let's dig into bones a little bit. So during this time of adolescence, as I mentioned earlier, about half of the peak bone mass accumulates. Now this is critical, you guys, because we can deposit and make bones stronger up until at the very latest age 30. So this teenage years are critical for building strong bones. Once you hit 30, you can do whatever and you're not going to increase your bone mineral density unless you take medication for it. So these are the bone building years, adolescence. And to build bones, you need good genetics and weight bearing exercise. Okay, this is a impact, right? Impact, when you impact and you put your weight on your bones, and what that does is it stimulates them to grow. Smoking alcohol can decrease bone mineral density, and many nutrients are involved and important. You know, calcium and vitamin D, learned this forever. These are found in milk. What you need enough protein, but what we'll highlight here is vitamin K. You might not think that vitamin K is all that useful for bone density. Vitamin K, as you recall, is a clotting protein, right? It's a clotting vitamin. It's required to make sure that our blood clots. But also, vitamin K is also important in developing bone density. Okay, there's some molecules that are made that vitamin K alters to make the bones more likely to hold in those calcium and phosphorus. So where do we get vitamin K? Oils and fruits and vegetables. This is where a plant-based diet can help our bone density. Now, sadly, it's so important this time, but adolescents have a high prevalence of nutrient deficiencies. Common: calcium, iron, vitamin A and C, fiber, folic acid, and they're more likely to get all these processed food items, which you're familiar with. And in studies that have looked at the vegetable intake of adolescents, French fries are the predominant vegetable, which I have trouble. To me, this is like calling a potato chip a vegetable, right? I mean, it originated from a potato, but French fries are not a vegetable yet. It shows up. Okay, so in this lecture, I also like to talk about acne because a lot of people are interested in this. Is there a connection with diet and acne? Yeah, there is. It's not cut and dry. There's a lot of other things. So let's know what causes acne. Let's kind of frame this. So, overactive sebaceous glands, those are glands that produce oil. And some people have a difference in the composition, right? Genetically, a difference in the oil. And some, it's more favorable to bacteria. The oil remains in the pore, which blocks the duct. Okay, more skin is produced than normal. And so the cells aren't shed. So we're building up the oil and then skin. And then what happens is normal skin bacteria in these pores that are blocked up start growing. And then, and so we have what is called we have a plug duct and excess sebum and skin cells. So the bacteria produce waste products that cause inflammation. So there's bacteria growing there. Okay, so it's just a skin difference, it's a genetic difference, and it's an oil difference. So there's your bacteria, right? So what about diet? Can we do anything about this? There's some indication that this is kind of high sugar foods, your sodas, your any item that raises your blood sugar, candies, can raise insulin, which raises testosterone. Androgen hormones is the same thing. And so that increases the acne risk. So girls with polycystic ovarian syndrome, remember we talked about this a while back, they also have high levels of androgen hormones, high levels of insulin, high levels of testosterone. And one of the side effects of polycystic ovarian syndrome is also having acne. So there may be some connection with dairy. People often say, oh, don't drink dairy, it'll influence your risk for getting acne, but it's a mushy data. It may be true, but it's still mushy data. And then there's some issues about what can you do. So right now, the bottom line with diet and acne is try to eat whole foods and stop having this high glycemic load thing going on. But it's difficult to research because diets are complex and people know what they're eating. So I end up this lecture talking about food sources and nutrients. I picked this lecture to do it so that you have a place, a go-to place, to remind yourself of the food sources of nutrients. So these are often the basis of final exam questions, multiple choice questions. Which of the following foods, which of the following vitamins is found in this conglomerate of foods? So vitamin A, to remind you, it's in plants, it's a colored plants, orange, red, yellow. B6, soybeans and bananas and meat, fish, beans, and whole grains. Vitamin E, typically in oils, but also nuts. Vitamin D, sunlight, fortified milk, and we talked about this last time, sardines, if you'll do it. Vitamin C, your fresh fruit and vegetables are going to be good sources, and folic acid. We've talked about this before. So green leafy vegetables, beans, asparagus, oranges are good sources. So the other nutrients that I want to emphasize here are iron. We've talked about this before, so this is redundant. Fish, lean meats, green vegetables, iron fortified cereals, raisins, and nuts. Calcium and dairy products. We mentioned this last time, broccoli, bok choy, and kale. This is exactly what we talked about last time. Also sardines because of the bones, almonds, and salmon. Zinc is mostly found in meat products, although beans and whole grains have some. Magnesium, I always think of nuts and beans and grains. And fiber is probably easier for you to figure out than anything else. When you ever have a full skin cell component of plants and grains, you're going to have more fiber. Okay, so that's the end of the formal lecture on adolescence. And then the lecture that follows, it'll be next Tuesday, will be on eating disorders. And in that lecture, we're going to talk about how people get started with definitions of eating disorders, how people get started, what we can do to help, help people with these eating disorders and address things like marketing and things like that that affect all of the kids. So are there any questions about the lecture for today? Anything about adolescence that you want to bring up? Do y'all remember being kids? It hasn't been that long, right? 5-10 years, depending on where you are. 4, 3 years.
What kind of exercises do you recommend, like weight-bearing exercises for bone health, like for this age group?
No, I love that. Thank you. So physical activity guidelines for Americans are pretty much what we want to do. So my professional answer is, get 150 minutes of moderate to extensive physical activity a week, and do weight bearing exercise twice a year. That's a minimum. Twice a week. Sorry, that's a minimum. I think people should stress their bones every day. And we've become such a sedentary group. Most of the risk for obesity and overweight happens around, too much food, and then the fact that we sit around so much. And then my next answer to that is fun. Having something fun to do is a game changer, whether it's biking or, important things like pickleball or tennis or basketball or aerobics classes, or, some people really need that social input. They need to do things together. They're more likely to do it. Get a physical trainer if you have money, but also walk to places and ride your bike to places. But what we need to get away from is that an hour a day is enough. This is my opinion of the entire issue of healthy body weight and growth. An hour a day, a lot of people get up. I used to do this for years when my kids were little. I'd get up at 4, work for an hour and a half, and then go run, 3 or 4 miles. I ran 4 miles a day for like 30 years, right? So it was in my habit. Now, I don't think that was good for me in the long run because I didn't get enough sleep. But then the other thing is I would run, exercise for up to an hour, and then sit down at my desk all day and work, right? And you know what happens? You gain weight. So that action probably help with bone density, but it was difficult to maintain a healthy weight. What I needed to do is go for 2 more walks in a day, which is what I have been able to pull off at work in the past few years. And my colleagues do it. So, but look at your jobs. You go from adolescence to, some kids have jobs, some don't do anything. And then you get into the early years where you guys, I'm sure a lot of you've been working, right? And you don't have much time for yourself to take care of your physical self. And that's probably one of the most critical things you should do. So any game they'll play, get into it, become a maniac about it, have fun with it, do it social, but do something. And weights, we need weights 3 days a week. That's what helps with the bone density. It's walking. Swimming is a great exercise, but it doesn't stress the joints or the bones. Actually, the stressing is what really helps with bone density. It's like people that play tennis, they'll have more density in their tennis arm than they will in the other arm. All right, so that physical input and things makes a difference. Does that answer it?
Hello, yeah, that definitely answered it. I was just kind of wondering, like, as far as like weightlifting, like, is that a little too young still? You're just saying general sports? Okay.
No, it's absolutely okay. I have to look at the ACSM guidelines on this, but so I don't have the. Let me give myself a look up on this, so that I give you an accurate number. So I'm going with opinion on this, but I want to make sure I tell you what the guidelines are. We all need to use our muscles, but you're talking about formal weight training, and there can be too early of an age for kids where they're not ready for the type of stress that they undergo. So I need to look this up for you, okay, to be accurate.